Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt tension or spent time around someone negative and noticed your own mood changing afterward? Or maybe you opened social media feeling completely fine and 20 minutes later felt anxious, angry, overwhelmed, or emotionally exhausted. Now, that's not just your imagination. Human beings are deeply influenced by the emotional environment around them. In many ways, emotions are contagious. And today we're talking about how other people's energy affects your mindset, your nervous system, your emotional health, and how to protect your peace without disconnecting from humanity. Welcome to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, where we explore the keys to unlocking your full potential and living your best life. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. Whether you're looking to make a breakthrough, overcome a challenge, or simply live with greater clarity, joy, and purpose, you'll find the tools and inspirations you need right here. So let's start your journey towards personal mastery and growth right now. Welcome back to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, your go-to resource for practical tips, insightful research, and inspiring stories to help you unlock your full potential. I'm your host, Jose Johnson, and I'm an expert in the field of mindfulness, mindset, and peak performance. And I am so excited to have you here with me today. Now, over the past few episodes, we've been exploring the hidden psychological patterns that shape our emotional lives. We've talked about unrealistic expectations in relationships. We've explored the second arrow and how the mind amplifies suffering. And last week, we discussed the internal narratives that quietly shape identity and behavior. Well, today, we're expanding the conversation outward because your mindset is not shaped only by your internal thoughts. It's also shaped by the emotional environments that you repeatedly expose yourself to. And honestly, I think many people underestimate just how much emotional energy influences their stress, motivation, mood, relationships, decision making, and even physical health. So today we're going to explore emotional contagion, the neuroscience behind emotional absorption, why negativity spreads so easily, and how to protect your emotional state without becoming emotionally disconnected from other people. Let's start here. Human beings are incredibly social creatures. Our nervous systems are constantly reading the emotional environment around us, and much of this happens unconsciously. Think about how naturally emotions spread. One person starts laughing, and suddenly everyone else begins to laugh too. One person panics, and anxiety spreads through the room. One person walks in angry, and suddenly everybody feels tense. Even yawning spreads automatically. Human beings are wired for emotional synchronization. Neuroscientists often discuss something called mirror neurons, which are involved in helping us recognize and internally simulate the emotional states and actions of others. In simple terms, your brain is constantly scanning and mirroring emotional information from the people around you. The nervous system is always reading the emotional weather. And honestly, this ability helped humans to survive. If danger spread through the tribe quickly, people were more likely to stay alive. The problem is, modern environments constantly expose us to emotional stimulation. Now we absorb stress from the workplace, outrage from social media, anxiety from the news, tension from relationships, and emotional overload from people who are themselves dysregulated. And many people never stop to ask how much of what I'm feeling actually belongs to me. And that is a powerful question because sometimes we think something's wrong with me, when in reality, we may simply be emotionally overloaded by our environment. One of the most important mindset principles people can understand is this: your environment is always shaping you. Always. The people you spend time with influence your mindset, your emotional patterns, expectations, habits, stress levels, beliefs, and even your perception of what feels normal. If you spend enough time in highly anxious environments, anxiety starts feeling normal. If you spend enough time around chronic negativity, negativity starts sounding reasonable. If you spend enough time around emotionally reactive people, emotional reactivity can start becoming your default setting. And honestly, social media has intensified this dramatically. Most people are now consuming massive amounts of emotional content every single day. Outrage, conflict, fear, comparison, division, catastrophizing. And the nervous system was never designed to absorb this level of emotional stimulation constantly. And that really matters because repeated exposure creates conditioning. What feels normal to you may simply be what you've repeatedly been exposed to. And that realization can be life-changing because many people don't realize they've been emotionally conditioned by family dynamics, workplace culture, friend groups, online environments, or social expectations. Over time, emotional environments become internalized. That's why environment matters so much in personal growth. You can't continually immerse yourself in emotional chaos and expect inner peace to happen automatically. Now, this raises an important question. Why does negativity affect us so strongly? Why can one negative interaction ruin an otherwise good day? Well, again, the answer comes back to survival wiring. The brain has what psychologists call a negativity bias. Negative experiences capture attention more intensely because, historically, paying attention to threats increased the chance of survival. Your brain is constantly asking, what could hurt me? This means that criticism can feel louder than praise, that conflict feels more emotionally intense than harmony, and emotionally charged experiences tend to stick longer in our memory. Now, this is also why emotionally reactive environments feel so exhausting. The nervous system becomes hypervigilant. The amygdala activates, stress hormones increase, the body prepares for danger. And unfortunately, many people are now living in a near constant state of low-grade emotional activation. Always stimulated, always reacting, always consuming. And over time, chronic emotional overloads starts impacting your sleep, your focus, your patience, your relationship, and your creativity, and decision-making, and physical health. Now, this is one reason emotional boundaries matter so much, because protecting your emotional state is not selfish. It's maintenance. Now let's talk about empathy and compassion, because this is where I think so many people struggle, especially caregivers, healthcare workers, coaches, leaders, parents, and people who naturally absorb emotional energy. Some people believe being compassionate means emotionally carrying everyone else's pain. But compassion does not require emotional self-destruction, and that is important. You can care deeply about people without drowning in their emotional state. You can support someone without absorbing all of their chaos. You can listen with empathy without being emotionally consumed. And honestly, this is something I think many people need to learn, because emotional absorption can quietly lead to burnout, resentment, exhaustion, emotional numbness, compassion fatigue, and chronic overwhelm. Healthy empathy includes boundaries, and boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries are just regulation. One of the most powerful things you can learn is how to remain emotionally present without emotionally merging with every environment you enter. Because if you absorb every emotional storm around you, eventually your own nervous system never gets a chance to recover. All right, so let's make this practical. Protecting your emotional environment does not mean hiding from the world. It means becoming more intentional about what you repeatedly expose your nervous system to. Now, one of the first places to examine is media consumption. Ask yourself, how much emotional noise am I consuming every day? How much outrage? How much fear? How much compassion? How much comparison? How much emotional stimulation? Because many people are overstimulated without realizing it. Another powerful strategy is creating intentional nervous system resets throughout the day. Simple practices matter. Just stepping outside, taking some deep breaths, taking short breaks from the screen, spending time out in nature, listening to calming music, practicing mindfulness, moving your body, or simply sitting in silence for a few moments. Now, these are not small things. They're forms of nervous system regulation. And honestly, mindfulness plays a huge role here because mindfulness helps us notice if the environment is affecting you. Without awareness, emotional absorption happens automatically. But with awareness, we gain choice. And remember, mindfulness does not require sitting cross-legged for hours trying to empty your mind. Sometimes mindfulness is simply noticing tension in your body, emotional overload, irritability, mental noise, or emotional exhaustion before it spirals further. Small moments of awareness can completely shift emotional momentum. Another important practice is evaluating your emotional inputs. Ask yourself, who consistently drains me? What environments leave me feeling anxious or depleted? What environments help me feel calm, creative, grounded, or energized? What emotional patterns have I normalized? Now, these questions matter. And this is exactly why I've developed something called the Emotional Environment Audit, because many people don't realize how much their emotional state is being shaped by repeated exposure to environments, relationships, media, and emotional dynamics that quietly dysregulate the nervous system. The Emotional Environment Audit is designed to help people identify emotional energy drains, hidden stressors, unhealthy emotional patterns, and practical ways to create healthier emotional environments. So if you've been struggling to manage your emotions, use the link in the show notes to download the free workbook, because I think it's going to be an incredibly valuable resource for people who want to protect their peace without disconnecting from life. Now, before we finish, there's one more important point. We often focus on how other people's energy affects us, but we rarely ask, what energy am I bringing into the room? Because emotional contagion works both ways. Your presence affects people too. Your emotional state influences conversations, relationships, workplaces, teams, families, and environments. People feel your tension, but they also feel your calm. They feel your frustration, or they can feel your patience. They can sense your anxiety or your groundedness. This doesn't mean you have to be positive all the time. That's completely unrealistic. But it does mean emotional awareness matters because every interaction contributes something to the emotional atmosphere around you. So ask yourself, do people feel calmer after interacting with me? More anxious? More inspired? More drained? More seen? Or more judged? Right? These are powerful reflection questions because ultimately, protecting your emotional environment is not just about what you absorb. It's also about what you contribute. Look, human beings are deeply influenced by emotional environments. The people around us matter. The media we consume matters. The environments we normalize matter. The emotional energy we repeatedly expose ourselves to matters. And while we cannot control every environment we enter, we can become more intentional about what we absorb, how we regulate, and what we contribute. Awareness changes everything. So this week, I want you to begin paying attention to one simple question. What emotional environment am I repeatedly exposing myself to? And even more importantly, how are those environments shaping me? Now, that awareness alone can begin transforming your emotional health and your mindset. All right, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to share with someone who may need to hear it. And as always, please subscribe, follow, and leave a review because it really helps us continue reaching more people with these conversations. So until next time, remember, it is what it is, but it becomes what you make it. So make it great. Thanks for tuning in. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind you that the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional advice or treatment. While the content of this podcast is based on research and personal experience, everyone's situation is unique, and the advice given may not be applicable to all. Always consult a qualified professional before making significant changes in your life. The Personal Mastery and Growth podcast is recorded at the So Good Media Studios located in the Candy Factory, a co-working space in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.